Ready, Set, RC, back again today, and today we have the final thoughts review of the Supper Rock Rey SRR. We've had this vehicle from the beginning of the year. We've driven this vehicle on sand, grass, loose dirt. We've jumped it on piles. We've jumped it off ramp. We've taken it on 8S runs. We've also taken it on 6S. We've had some breaks, and we'll discuss that throughout the video. We're gonna go through this with our normal final thoughts topics, which is electronics, drivetrain, handling and suspension, durability, workability, support, and the two opinionated parts of this, which is it worth it and would I buy it again? Electronics. So to start off, transmitter and receiver that come with this. It's a typical DX2E controller that comes with this vehicle. Full disclaimer guys, I did not use the DX2E active controller that comes with this vehicle. I have my normal Spectrum controller that I use, which is my DX4R, and I've showed that on multiple videos, what I've been using from the beginning all the way up until this point. I've used the DX2E active several times in the past. They definitely are more plastic feeling than the controller that I typically used, but it is a RTR controller and it is more than suitable for this vehicle. In regards to the receiver, I had no problems with the receiver cutting out from the controller. It worked fine, no issues. Actually, I'm still using the stock receiver on here. It binds well with my current controller. As for the ESC and motor, temps were very good. At this point in time, I've upped the pinion on here and I am still not having any issues with heat on this vehicle. What I did find on this vehicle, and which is completely different from my Supper Baja Rey, is that this is running a lower gear ratio, and I would imagine that's because of the size of these tires, than my Supper Baja Rey. Based on the runnings that I've seen when I was running it with the stock 16-tooth pinion, I felt that it needed to gear up a little bit. So I did go to 18-tooth, and I actually feel that's where this truck is home right now. As for the servo on here, it's a little slow, especially moving these big, huge tires that are on this truck. But I think it was fine. I mean, it's fine for on here for the types that you're driving. I think when you start to drive on 8S, you really see the limitations on the servo. But on 6S, I think the servo is perfectly fine with this vehicle. Drivetrain. In regards to the drivetrain on this vehicle, had no issues. The front drive shafts, even though these are plastic, they're pretty beefy. In regards to the rear is a huge drive shaft coming off the rear to the solid axle. No problems whatsoever. Actually, there's a disclaimer that's on there which says that it's warning, it gets very hot. In regards to the center drive shaft, no issues, no breakages, no damage whatsoever. It is held up well, supplies the power evenly to the vehicle. I'm not having any issues with bleeding or anything like that in regards to the power being bleeded to the front. Perfectly set up in regards to how the drivetrain is on this vehicle. Handling and suspension. These shocks, and if anyone's ever owned a Losi vehicle, the shocks are butter smooth. They just really do soak up the jumps, the hits, everything. I mean, the shocks, no concerns whatsoever. And I don't think I've ever owned a Losi vehicle where I was concerned with the shocks on them and how the shocks were set up on there. So in regards to handling and suspension in regards to this vehicle, I have no problems whatsoever on it. Durability, and this is where we'll probably spend a couple of minutes on it. I had no issues in regards to the rear of the vehicle. Solid drive shaft that's on here. The upper links that are on here, no issues whatsoever. That's the only issue I've ever had on my Supper Baja Rey. Took a very bad tumble and the upper support on that of the trailing arm snapped. In regards to the Supper Rock Rey, I've been having issues in the front. The only thing that I have not broken on the front so far, steering rod. My hits have not been to the point where my steering rod has snapped or caused any damage on here, the servo saver. Everything else on the front in regards to that portion of it, no issues. What I have broken so far is I've broken bolt spindles on this vehicle. In one jump, bolt spindles. Yes, it was a nose landing on here that caused that problem, and both spindles broke on here. Now, I hope you'll probably not be able to capture this on the video, but the tires on this truck definitely stick out, if not right at the edge of this front bumper. The tires on this vehicle stick out just about, if not a little more, than where this front bumper is. And there's not that much support when these wheels hit and assume the first impact on this truck. So that's one thing that I've noticed that I've had an issue with, is the spindles on here are prone to break. Now this is, as I said, this is the first edition, the first one's off the assembly. That's probably something that they will correct, or a third party vendor will come out with more suitable or durable plastics in regards to that. But I will say I did drive this in the winter months when I experienced this break. The second break that I got on this truck, which I didn't expect to happen, but after taking further look on the Super Baja Rey and comparing it to the Super Rock Rey, are these upper support arms. Now the plastics held up well. What the weak point is this very thick turnbuckle that's in here. I mean, this thing is massive, but for some reason, took a bad fall when I drove this thing on 8S, and it snapped, completely snapped. Plastics held up well, but the only thing was that the metal actually snapped on there. That is a little bit of a concern for me in regards to a weak point. And I don't know if anyone could correct that, because that's definitely an issue if you're going to take any of those impacts. And this was more so, the vehicle was somersaulting on 8S and just hitting the side wheel like this. And that impact just transferred right to that brake point. Was it a big issue? No. It's probably, I mean, you have to take the entire cage off to get to it. You have to take off the sway bar in the front to get to it. It's not a lot of screws if you don't count the ones removing the cage, but it is work. And regardless of the fact, that's one of the things that I've never broken on my Super Baja Rey, because the Super Baja Rey does not have this turnbuckle link for the upper support. It's just all plastic going straight across. That way the plastic can absorb that hit a lot better than this metal turnbuckle that you see here today. Those are the only two breaks that I've had with this vehicle. There hasn't been anything else, but the concerns that I have in the front let me to believe that this could be a reoccurring issue. Workability. This vehicle, I find, is no more different than working on the Super Baja Rey. If you're familiar to the Super Baja Rey, even the Baja Rey and the Rock Rey, you're familiar with this. With most scaled vehicles, there are going to be a little bit more involved when it comes to removing parts off to get to it. As you guys saw on my tips video, you do not need to remove all these screws to get to the inners of this truck. There's 14 screws. Once you remove those 14 screws, the entire cage comes right off, and this whole truck is exposed to work on. It's very easy to work on once you get it to that point, but it is 14 screws to remove on. I will say the biggest pain on this truck to get anything to work on is when it comes time to assembling things back. So getting this whole cage back, there's a lot of adjustments you got to do on the rear to really get everything lined up rightly to fit in there. The front goes on very easily. The rear is where it gets a little bit difficult to line everything up, and you'll spend a couple of minutes getting that rear together. But outside of that, I found that the vehicle is fairly similar to any other truck once you get the cage removed, and doing work on this is fairly easy. Support. I will say, in regards to support, first broke the spindles on this truck, one of my subscribers, Roadside RC, reached out to me on Losi's Facebook page. They were stating to contact them directly in regards to breakages on the spindles. I did that. Losi shortly, and this is while the spindles, this is just when the vehicle came out, and while the spindles were actually out of stock. Losi went ahead, sourced their spindles from one of their other warehouses, and I had the spindles to me in less than a week. So in regards to support on this vehicle, I've had no issues with it. And that's free of charge, guys. Just make sure I state that point too. Those spindles that they replaced, they were free of charge. They did not charge me for them. I got those in, and at the same time while I was getting those in, the release of the metal spindles came out. And I just went ahead with the metal spindles from that point. I'll keep the plastic ones as spares, but for right now, just because of timing, the metal spindles came out and I went ahead and I put the metal spindles on this vehicle. My interaction with Losi has been great whatsoever. And that goes with every vehicle that I've owned for Losi. I've never had an issue in regards to support and them standing behind their vehicles. Is it worth it? So at the time of this video and when I purchased this truck, it was selling for $799. Compared to what I paid for the Supper Rey, $649 is what I think it's selling for as of right now. Looking at the scaleness of this vehicle, you know, as you take this all in, there's a lot of scale accessories and the looks of this truck. And at the time when the Supper Rey was coming out, it wasn't geared to the scalability that this is as of today. There's a lot of licensing that's on here in regards to the badging and the naming on here, and that has to go for something because that's definitely not on the Supper Rey. For the $799 price and what I know today in regards to how this truck performs and what's in it, maybe it's right there. Of course, as a consumer, I'd always like to see it be less. Maybe it's right there at $799. Of course, I would probably like to see this more towards $699 of what I know in regards to third-party support for parts. You really, as a rock racer, there's nothing really out here like this. I mean, at the time of this video, the Axial Yeti has been discontinued, which would have probably been the closest comparisons to this. But you have to remember, this is an 8S truck. It is built as a 5th scale vehicle. It is 1/6, but it is completely built as a 1/5 scale vehicle. It is not a 1/8 scale kind of, you know, faking itself off as a 1/6 scale vehicle. It is truly 1/6 scale with 1/5 scale durability parts in here. So I'd have to say in regards to how this vehicle is built, the parts that they put in here, there is a tremendous amount of value. Now, because what I know in regards to the durability side of it is where I would like to see the price drop. And that's where I have the concern, is that this front end of this truck with the weight and the capabilities of driving this on 8S, I simply have concerns on how all of this holds up. I've definitely had my breakages on here, and now out of the few times that I've taken this truck out for runs, I'm having issues right here. Maybe a little bit more than what I would expect for the type of driving that I've shown on the videos. The question comes down to, is the $799 worth it or not? For me, I would like to see it drop another $100 based on what I know today. Unless Losi goes in and does something in regards to this front end, I'd like to see that price drop. I love the scalability on here. I love the badging and everything and the looks of the vehicle. That's great. But I'd like to see this part of the vehicle severely addressed. I think there's just way too much going on. And a lot of it could be, as we go into the next topic, is where would I buy this again? And this is where that discussion goes right into, is that knowing what I know about this front, would I buy this vehicle again? And if I had a choice between this and, let's say, the Supper Rey, knowing what I know, I'd probably buy the Supper Rey. I probably would not buy the Supper Rock Rey. The Supper Rey has been a tank. I haven't had any issues with it whatsoever. I've had one break, and it was like a $20 part, replaced it, and I haven't had an issue at all. And I've shown videos of that thing taking poundings and tumbles, and it doesn't break. It holds up. And the reason why there's a lot more support going on in front of here. Now, I don't know if the T-Bone Racing bumper and all the support that they're throwing into this front is going to help. I saw where Sergeant Jay's put that in the front of his truck, and definitely I'll be coordinating and talking to him and seeing how that's been holding up and watching his videos and seeing how that's holding up going on in the future. But for me, this is where I think there's a huge issue. There's just too much exposure with the weight and the speed of this vehicle coming in. Now, I've broken this thing on 6S. I've broken it on 8S. So it's not power. At one point, I did think, you know, when I ran it on 8S and I snapped the upper support arm, I thought it was an 8S to 6S problem. But the problem is that when you run it on 6S and you take those jumps, this front end tends to nose down a lot. And you need that power to kind of get that front end up. So that's where either running this on 8S or changing out your pinions is going to give you that ability to kind of get that front end up a little bit, which is what this truck needs. Because the minute you nose down on here, something's going to happen. It may not happen on the first, the second, or the third jump, but it's going to happen eventually that front end is going to take some damage. It's just how this vehicle is so nose down on it. It just takes a lot of the abuse on here in the front, and there's not much support. Now, if there was some kind of bumper or some kind of way that the front was able to transfer that force throughout the vehicle, as opposed to this being the first means of contact, maybe that's it. And you got to remember, with all that speed and the size of these tires, it's just a lot of force that's coming through and transferring in the areas where there's some brakes on here. Now, the spindles themselves are not expensive. Neither are the A-arms. But you go through a few of these, that could rack up. I mean, granted, with the larger vehicles, everything's going to be more in cost. So you're looking at, you know, $20 a pop replacing these parts every time they break. Hopefully that doesn't happen. If I had to say, would I buy this again? I'll put it this way. If I'm a owner of a Super Baja Rey and I'm looking for something that does, you know, true rock bouncing, kind of that jack of all trades vehicle, I would buy this. If this is my first opportunity into 1/6 scale vehicles, 1/5, 1/6 scale vehicles, I'm going for the Super Baja Rey over this. Every time I'm going to take the Super Baja Rey over the Super Rock Rey. But that's me. You know, I like the way I like to bash, the way I like speed. I don't do 30-foot jumps, but I do like to hit the ramps. I'm liking the Super Baja Rey more than I'm liking the Super Rock Rey. But that's it, guys. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Check us out on Instagram for our latest post to the channel. This is Ready Set RC, signing out. Thanks again, guys.